So it's April 7th, 2026. We are 39 days into a really brutal regional war, and right now, the entire world is holding its breath. See, in just a few hours, a deadline is going to pass that could either pull the Middle East back from the brink or, well, plunge it into an even deeper catastrophe. So tonight, we're going to break down how we got to this critical moment and, more importantly, what could happen next. And this is why everyone is so on edge. That was the ultimatum delivered by US President Donald Trump. He set a hard deadline, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The message couldn't be clearer. Iran has to capitulate, they have to reopen the world's most important oil choke point, or they will face the complete and total destruction of their national infrastructure.
And that really brings us to the crucial question, doesn't it? What happens when that clock finally runs out? Are we about to see some last-minute diplomatic miracle? Or is the entire region about to witness an escalation unlike anything we've seen in modern history?
To really get what's at stake tonight, we need to take a quick look back at how we even got here. You know, this war didn't just start 39 days ago. No, this is the final explosion after a 3-year cycle where all these shadow wars and proxy conflicts finally just boiled over into a direct, full-blown war between nations. The fuse was really lit way back in late 2023. That's when Iran's whole network of proxies across the region got activated. That simmered for a while and then led to the incredibly intense 12-day war in mid-2025. This was a direct missile fight that pretty much shattered all the old rules. But the final straw, well, that was internal. In January 2026, massive anti-regime protests in Iran were met with a horrific crackdown. We're talking tens of thousands killed. The US and Israel saw that and thought the regime was cracking, that it was vulnerable to a decisive blow. So on February 28th, they launched their full-scale invasion. And that earlier conflict, that 12-day war, it was a brutal preview of what was to come. Just look at the numbers. The attrition was just staggering. Iran lost over 1,000 people and key military assets, all while launching over 550 missiles in return. It was a huge blow that left the regime shaky, both economically and militarily, which really just set the stage for the war we're seeing now. And the opening shot of this war was, without a doubt, one of the most significant moments of the 21st century. In that first wave of almost 900 strikes, a US or Israeli weapon killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He'd been in power for nearly 4 decades. This was a classic decapitation strike designed to make the whole regime collapse. But it didn't exactly go to plan. Instead of collapsing, Iran's hardline Revolutionary Guard took control and unleashed their main survival strategy, something called horizontal escalation. The whole idea is to encircle their enemies. They want to light fires on multiple fronts all across the Middle East to make the cost of this war just too high for the US and its allies to bear. And the most active and frankly most devastating of these fronts is in Lebanon. Hezbollah has just unleashed its massive arsenal on northern Israel, and that triggered a huge Israeli ground invasion. The human cost has been absolutely staggering. Over 1.2 million people have been forced from their homes, with thousands of casualties. And this just shows you how wide this war has truly spread. Down in Yemen, the Houthis are threatening to close a second critical waterway. Over in Iraq, militias are hitting U.S. bases again and again. Just this morning, a drone hit a U.S. base in Kuwait. And at the same time, Saudi Arabia had to shoot down a whole barrage of missiles and drones aimed right at its oil facilities. This isn't a conflict in one country, it's a true regional war. But you know, the fight isn't just with bombs and missiles. This is literally the first war in history where cyber attacks have had the same impact as a massive bombing campaign. A joint US-Israeli cyber offensive has pretty much blacked out Iran's entire internet, crippling the regime's ability to coordinate its own forces. So, with the fighting getting worse on all of these fronts, you're probably asking, okay, why haven't the peace talks worked? Well, the simple answer is that the things Washington wants and the things Tehran wants, they are just fundamentally, completely incompatible. And back in Washington, the political pressure is just immense. A clear majority of Americans, 56%, are actually against this military action. This isn't a popular war, which makes it really, really hard for the administration to figure out a long-term plan. And when you dig into those numbers, you see this incredibly stark divide. 84% of Republicans support the war, while only 7% of Democrats do. I mean, with a split that deep, trying to find any kind of political agreement on how to end this thing is, well, it's almost impossible. And this right here, this table, gets to the absolute heart of the diplomatic problem. Just look at it. The US demands the Strait of Hormuz be opened, no conditions. Iran says, nope, only if you lift the sanctions. The US wants to keep all sanctions in place. Iran wants them all gone. The US is offering maybe a temporary ceasefire. Iran demands a permanent end to the war. And here's the biggest deal breaker. The US wants to pick an acceptable new leader for Iran. Iran, of course, is determined to keep its current system of rule. They're not just on different pages. They're in completely different books.
Which brings us right back to the final crucial question. What happens in just a few hours? As you might expect, analysts have mapped out 3 very different futures that could begin the second the deadline expires.
Okay, scenario 1 is the best case. A last-minute deal is somehow reached, maybe brokered by Pakistan, and a very fragile ceasefire takes hold. Scenario 2 is terrifying. No deal happens, and the US unleashes something called Operation Hell, a campaign to systematically wipe out Iran's power grid and transportation, which would risk a massive humanitarian crisis. And then there's scenario 3, the gusher. Iran responds to that escalation by blockading 2 major waterways at once, which would crater the global economy, cause a worldwide recession, and almost certainly force a massive US ground invasion. A fragile peace, a nation's collapse, or a global economic depression. 3 totally different futures, and they're separated by just a few hours. As that clock ticks down to 8 p.m., the only question left is, which one of them begins tonight?